Good morning, church. Are you ready for another day? Whatever it may be, whether it's work, school, or play, I hope that today is a day where you can look forward with confidence in Jesus. With that, let's begin. Now, when I was growing up, there were many instances and moments where I was disciplined, but I failed to understand why I was getting disciplined. Now, of course, on certain occasions, my failure to understand of why I was being disciplined was because of maybe poor communication from my parents or for whoever was giving me discipline, or maybe they just didn't clearly tell me, or maybe in the moment or the spur of the moment that it happened, communication was impossible. But there were more times than not that I remember these very unpleasant moments and then realizing later the reasoning and the significance of why I was being disciplined. And most of the time, those moments, though being extremely unpleasant at that time, all had very good reason and justification for why it happened. For example, have any of you in your memory tried to stick a fork or some kind of metal object into an electrical outlet? Or maybe when you were a kid or a little child, you tried to just stick your finger into it. And as you maybe attempted to do something like this, your parents came along and took that object away from you and pulled you away and said, "No, you can't do that." And in the process, you start to cry as that smile on your face turns upside down, your face turns sour, and your eyes start to pour out tears like a river. You just don't understand. Or maybe as a little kid, you get hungry, so you decide to try cooking your own food, or maybe you're trying to cook food for your siblings. But in that process, as you're pulling out that large kitchen knife, or you're turning on the stove, or turning on the oven, or taking an aluminum foil wrapped hamburger and throwing it into the microwave, your parents come and stop you and say, "No, you can't do that." You get scared, and your heart starts to shrink, and you start to panic. You don't understand. Right? All you want to do is just feed your siblings, or you're just getting hungry. And in your fear, you start to shake and you can't take it, so you start to cry. You don't understand. It feels so unfair and you're left disappointed. Or maybe as a child, you're playing with your siblings, or maybe you had a pet and you were kind of getting a little rough and rowdy, and your parents come away and pull you away and say, "No, you can't do that." And then put you in timeout and say, "For the rest of the day, no more." You don't understand, right? You love your sibling, you love your pet, you don't mean any harm. You're so disappointed, and it makes no sense. Now, even for my cat Mango, sometimes she'll jump up onto the dinner table or onto the stove or maybe start scratching something that she's not supposed to. Or there was a time when she would get into the snack closet and eat all these snacks that she's not supposed to eat, and she makes a mess all over the floor. And so I come and I take it away and I say, "No, Mango, no." And I put her into the bathroom and tell her, no people interaction for 5 minutes. And I would think that, well, maybe she doesn't understand what I'm saying, but maybe she's thinking, this human, like, why is he doing this to me? I just want to eat snacks. I'm a little hungry. I can't help myself. What's the big deal? And as maybe Mango sits in this dark bathroom by herself, she cries out for attention because she doesn't understand. But you see, in all of these instances, we might not get it in the moment, but if you think about it, this is what we would call tough love. But because of this tough love, it allows us to grow towards greater maturity and responsibility. And often in these moments of tough love, we are brought to tears of pain or maybe disappointment or confusion. But this tough love becomes necessary so that we can grow in wisdom and maturity. We might not understand it then and there, but later it may become apparent and clear that without it, we would have never known, and we wouldn't have been able to grow. Now today we look at Hebrews chapter 12, and we find very specifically in the middle of this chapter, it's a section that talks about the discipline of God, or what I'm going to call the tough love of God. Some of us might think, wait a minute, like discipline, punishment, like that sounds kind of bad, because it sounds like God is supposed to be a God of love and kindness. So it's kind of off. Let's look at Hebrews chapter 12, verse 5 and 6. It says, "And have you forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons? My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be wary when reproved by him. For the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and chastises every son whom he receives." Okay, so let's understand what's going on first. Hebrews is telling Christians to not grow weary, right? He's talking about this endurance for this life that we live in. And then Hebrew refers to an ideal that's found in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 11. And it talks about discipline, or this tough love of God. And he says, don't be discouraged, don't be afraid. But now you kind of are thinking, wait, why would God discipline us? Why? Like, don't be discouraged by that. That discourages me. But Proverbs answers that, and then Hebrews includes that into his quote. He says, because the Lord disciplines the one that he loves, and he chastises every son whom he receives. And you might think for a second, oh, yes, because he loves us, but then chastises. Whoa. Like, that's punishment. Why would God punish us? That's not loving. How is that loving? Now, the word chastise here is actually better understood as training up of a child or teaching, instruction. Yes, punishment is a part of the meaning, but really the main emphasis of this word is not punishment, but it's this preparation for life. And that's what Hebrews is really trying to emphasize. And what's even greater is that the discipline of God, its main motivation isn't to make us miserable. It isn't to hurt us. It isn't to give us pain or disappointment. The main motivation of God's discipline is love, his love for you and I. And this is why I like to refer it to as tough love. You see, if God didn't care for us, he would just let us be. He wouldn't try to train us up or teach us, but because he sees us as valuable, because he sees us as worth it, because he sees us as his children, he takes the time, he invests in us, he takes the energy, and he pays this price because he loves us. In the end, God's discipline, God's tough love, is really for our ultimate good. And Hebrew gets this when he says in verse 11, this, for the moment all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. You see, it might not make sense at first. You might want to run away from it, if anything. And you might think that God is out to make your life miserable, so you push him away. But Hebrew reassures us that if we trust in God's discipline, this tough love, it'll only make our faith stronger and more trained for what is yet to come. So church, remember this. God's tough love may seem tough at times, but through it we can mature and grow in our walk with him.